Now that I've watched and reviewed Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and since you can now go see it in theaters yourself, it's time for me to update my official ranking of every single Mission Impossible movie from worst to best. What's up, my dude? Your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and if you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies that are coming out in theaters and at home, make sure you subscribe. Also, I want to let you know this is going to be my ranking based on my favorite Mission Impossible movies. So it's going to be totally different than whatever your ranking is, but let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've seen every single Mission Impossible movie, which one's your favorite? And how do you rank the rest? But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with what I have in 7th place. And I think this is one that pretty much everyone has in last place. If you don't though, definitely let me know. That is Mission Impossible 2. Now, Mission Impossible 2 came out in 2000, 4 years after the original hit theaters. They got John Woo to direct it, and they went off in a completely different direction than what they had from the original movie. Despite coming out in the year 2000, this feels like the most ridiculous, over-the-top, drug-fueled rampage of a 90s action movie. Tom Cruise playing Ethan Hunt is completely different than the character that he played in the first movie, and really just becomes a caricature of a super spy secret agent. There are some decent action sequences, but where I think this movie went wrong the most is that they remove any kind of sense of urgency or danger for the main character. See, what I think a lot of us love about all the rest of the Mission Impossible movies is that it always feels like things can go very wrong very fast. And even though we're pretty sure Tom Cruise's character is going to survive no matter what, there's always a sense of concern there. You're always not quite sure. But in Mission Impossible 2, he's basically a superhero. Apparently, he all of a sudden knows all kinds of crazy kung fu and can take on any number of men twice his size. It is completely ridiculous, completely over the top. And I guess maybe fun in that regard, but if you're watching Mission Impossible, you're looking for something I think a little deeper than that. So for me, Mission Impossible 2, without a doubt, this was the easiest one to put on my list. It is going in a hard last place with really no other movie anywhere near it. And so now is where the ranking actually gets pretty difficult. All the rest of the Mission Impossible movies are at least good, if not great. However, there is one Mission Impossible movie that I really don't care to go back and rewatch a lot. And I feel like I'm kind of on an island with this one. But if I'm being honest, in 6th place for me is Mission Impossible Fallout. That's right. This is the one with Henry Cavill that everybody loves. But for me, it's just pretty forgettable in a lot of ways. And it tries to incorporate some twists that I saw coming a mile away. Yes, there are some cool action sequences. The skydive that they do pretty early in the movie is pretty phenomenal. Although what I didn't appreciate in that scene is that they CG'd in a bunch of clouds and lightning. And I feel like if they actually let us sit with Tom Cruise's character, with Ethan Hunt, as he's legitimately jumping out of a plane, it would be a lot more believable. But because they tried to amp it up with post-processing and CG, it really kind of took away a lot of the gut-wrenching, visceral reaction that you would have from something like that. There are some cool fight scenes though. There's a scene in the bathroom with Tom Cruise and Henry Cavill fighting a bad guy that I thought was really fun and exciting. And you do get a fair bit of character development throughout the movie, so it is a good movie, don't get me wrong. I also really like the ending, but for me, it just was a little too predictable and just didn't really stick with me as much. So for that reason, I have to put it in 6th place. Now that we get into the top 5, these are all fantastic movies. So this is gonna be really difficult for me to rank, but I have to put something in 5th place. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and say Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. And with a lot of these top 5 movies, I don't really have many negatives to say about them. They're all pretty great. And what I love about Rogue Nation, which, you know, other movies in the franchise do this, but I feel like Rogue Nation does it really well, is that it secludes the main character. It kind of puts Ethan Hunt off on his own and separates him from the government, kind of putting him on the run, which really builds the stakes of the movie and makes it feel like he's in so much more danger. Then, of course, there's the Syndicate and the whole introduction of that, which is really cool and creepy, with Sean Harris playing Lane, kind of the main bad guy there. He is fantastic in this role, and the way they introduce him in the movie is just so almost overwhelming, and he really feels like he's a step ahead of Ethan Hunt for a lot of it. This is also the first Mission Impossible movie that was directed by Chris McQuarrie, and I feel like he really poured a lot of his passion into this movie. I feel like he was probably under a lot of pressure with this one, and he totally knocked it out of the park. Next up on my list at number 4 is the brand new Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Now, this one might move up my list after we see Part 2, but as it stands on its own, I'm putting it kind of right there in the middle of my ranking. This movie is absolutely incredible. I got to see it in theaters with Dolby Vision and Atmos and all of that good stuff, and it was an experience. It really felt like I was on a roller coaster or some kind of movie ride at Disney or something like that. This movie also incorporates a lot of comedy in it. Of course, if you want to see my full thoughts on it, make sure you check out my review. I'll link that for you at the end of the video. But it incorporates a lot of comedy happy with the characters, and not in a manner that is jarring or doesn't really match what's going on screen, but instead you just put them in these ridiculous situations and have them react authentically to them. So you're getting this wild over the top action, but then you're getting their kind of response to that and how a normal human would respond when all these crazy things are happening around them. And so because of that, not only are you emotionally connected to the character, but you're getting a little bit of a laugh in there and really feeling the concern for them, which, as I mentioned before, is one of the most important things in a Mission Impossible movie. There's also some fantastic chase sequences. I think some of the best chase sequences in any Mission Impossible movie are in this one. And although I feel like it doesn't have the biggest stunts out of any of the movie, I also feel like it probably has the most consistent stunts. It moves at such a clip that even though the movie itself is pretty long at about 2 hours 45 minutes, you do not feel that length at all. It is just moving consistently the entire way through. Also, I want to give it kudos on the way it ends. It is a part 1, so we are expected to have it continue from here. But unlike a lot of recent movies that have come out, specifically Fast 10 or even Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, this wraps up its story in a really compelling and reasonable way. So even though we know there's more to be told, we're satisfied with what we've gotten so far. And so for that, I definitely gave it a positive review, and I'm putting it at number 4 on my list. All right, now we get into the top 3, and this is where it got really, really difficult for me because, again, I'm going off of my favorite movies in the franchise. And for me, although I have a great deal of nostalgia tied to this movie, I couldn't quite put it up there at number 1 or 2, so it's at 3. That is the original Mission Impossible. Now, I absolutely love this movie. It is fantastic. It is that kind of dark noir spy thriller, real classical in nature when it comes to that. And although we do get a fair bit of stunts, especially the scene at the CIA headquarters where he propels down from the ceiling that became super famous, it really is more of a mental game of who really is the bad guy, what's happening, why are people getting killed. It's a lot more cerebral than I think a lot of the other Mission Impossible movies. And for me, this is definitely the one that I've gone back and rewatched the most, without a doubt. So yes, maybe I have my nostalgia glasses on with this one, but for me, I had to put it up there on my list. So in third place, Mission Impossible, the original. Before we get to these top 2, I want to let you know that this video is sponsored by you. That's right. If you're wondering how are you sponsoring this video, just by watching it. By watching the video, you're helping out the channel, and I appreciate that. If you do want to take it a step further, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know your Mission Impossible ranking. Or if you don't feel like sharing all that, just click the little like button below the video. That helps out as well. And finally, if you want to go even a step beyond that and become most impressive, consider joining the channel as a member. If you go down to the description box below, there's a join button there. Basically, just throw me a couple bucks a month and it gives you a little more access to me directly. Otherwise, I have my Amazon affiliate link down there as well. So if you plan on buying anything on Amazon today, just go through that link in the description. It doesn't cost you anything extra and it just gives me a little kickback. So if you do, I appreciate it. But for now, let's get to the top 2. And for me, coming in second place is the Mission Impossible movie that I think is the most action-packed out of all of them. This movie has some stunts that made me cringe so hard because I was so concerned for what was going on screen. And that is Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. This movie has all of the positive notes from every Mission Impossible movie I've mentioned previously. It's got the action, it's got the crazy over-the-top stunts, it's got that feeling of concern for the characters that you're not sure if they're going to be able to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. It's got the espionage and the intrigue. It's got some really clever ways of solving problems while also making sure that everything feels authentic. You know, one thing that you can do a lot of times with a spy movie or with any kind of whodunit or anything like that is that you can just say at the end like, oh, they figured it out because they figured it out, without actually breaking it down and explaining the logic. And that is one thing that they do very well in most Mission Impossible movies, but especially in Ghost Protocol. They set up all of these problems, but they solve them in a way that is interesting but still makes sense. I also really love the team component of this movie. You have Jeremy Renner joining up, and the whole story about how he is connected to Ethan Hunt and kind of their past together that gets revealed throughout the movie, I felt like was really interesting and compelling. This to me is the kind of movie that if you're trying to introduce someone to the Mission Impossible franchise, you might want to show them this first. Even though they may not know who all the characters are, I think it is absolutely the most accessible. So for me, in second place, Ghost Protocol, which leaves only one. My personal favorite Mission Impossible movie of all time is Mission Impossible 3. Now, Mission Impossible 3 was a very surprising movie in the time that it came out. You have to understand, we were coming off of course, Mission Impossible 1, which was this very cerebral spy thriller. Then we go into Mission Impossible 2, which is a ridiculous and over-the-top action movie that didn't receive great reviews. And then finally, we bring it back around with Mission Impossible 3, which is directed by J.J. Abrams and stars all the usual suspects, plus Philip Seymour Hoffman as the main villain. And he is a phenomenal actor, or rather he was a phenomenal actor. And I think a lot of the reason why people know and love him so much, it comes out of this movie. He's truly haunting. And the way that he, as a villain, connects with Ethan Hunt in the film is so personal. This isn't necessarily a movie about stopping a bad guy from getting a nuclear bomb or releasing a virus. In fact, the main MacGuffin in the movie, they don't even reveal what it is. It's just this kind of nebulous, made-up thing called the rabbit's foot. But where the real conflict comes into play is Ethan Hunt trying to live a normal life with his wife, while at the same time, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character is tearing all of that apart around him. And unlike some of the other Mission Impossible movies, specifically Fallout, there are some twists in here with certain people and their motivations that are revealed towards the end of the movie that I don't think you'll be able to really figure out. I mean, you might if you just guess randomly, but it does a really good job of convincing you that people are acting in a certain way for certain reasons and then flipping that on its head a bit. I don't want to say too much to spoil the movie just in case you haven't seen it, but this one does a really good job of creating these really complex characters. And so, of course, I had to put Mission Impossible 3 at number 1 on my list. Again, this is just my personal ranking. These are my favorite Mission Impossible movies, but they're all, or almost all, still really good. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know your ranking of all the Mission Impossible movies. There is no right or wrong. It's all just opinion. As I mentioned before, I'll go ahead and link you to my review of the latest Mission Impossible movie right over here. So if you want to jump on into that. Otherwise, if you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies coming out in theaters and at home, make sure you subscribe. All right. I'll catch you in the next one. Be good.